I am so excited to be here for a number of reasons, but I just want to take it all in for a minute because you are a beautiful audience. And I've had a couple people ask me since I was here last, like, what's the deal with your grandbaby? Because I left I left Summit a little early last time, so I want to give you a really quick update. Do you guys have a picture of Eden for them? This is my only hope for work-life balance. She is officially 1 year old. She was born on Father's Day last year. And so, I work for work, but I also work for fun. I really enjoy working, so work is like my hobby. But she helps me stay grounded, and I think that's critically important. So that's Eden Aubrey, and I'll be happy to see her tomorrow. Okay, so let me begin by telling you how I actually got here. One of the things I think is critical, I'll go back there till you start with the first slide, thank you, is I started off as a young executive, what now would be maybe 15 years ago, a young vice president, and I wrote the job description for the role that I was taking on, and I was taking on a pretty extensive role, about 10,000 people, and I was going to be the vice president of one of our flagship hospitals at a huge healthcare system. And I remember being terrified. And I managed to get downtown, and I felt reasonably good about the job description. I felt like I had the competencies. But it wasn't until I got there that I really understood the role of an executive admin to an executive. Now, for me, that was my Beverly. And even to this day, me and Beverly are still wonderful partners. But here's what I'll tell you. I would have failed miserably in that role without Beverly. And I remember thinking to myself, she knew so much more than I knew. She was capable of doing things that me and our senior vice president had no knowledge of. I believe we could have been absent possibly for weeks, and Beverly could have conducted our business, and nobody would have ever known that me and John weren't there. So Beverly and I started a journey together, and I remember telling my senior vice president that I would make it my duty to get Beverly promoted before I left the organization. And he said to me, over my dead body. And I said to him, well, you can have it any way you want it. Because I knew Beverly's value. And so Beverly and I started going to wonderful admin lunch and learns on our campus. And I would go with her, and I'd sit, and I'd listen. And so after a while, they said, well, Veronica, do you have anything that you'd like to share with us? And so I started speaking at the lunch and learns for administrative and office professionals. And I remember thinking early on, man, this is my team. I remember thinking, this is a group of people I feel a natural kinship with. And so I stayed there, and as sovereignty would have it, I remember being invited to my first chapter event, and somebody called me, and they said, we have a lot of people, but we have a really small budget. Will you come? And I said I would, and I think I went. It was standing room only, and they said, all we have is $100, and I took the $100, but I remember thinking, I would have done that for free because I couldn't find people more hungry in the world that I lived in because everybody I knew felt like they already knew it all. And so I remember being there and feeling incredibly powerfully connected to those people, and I just know that for me, the reason I put my hat in the ring to be a part of this association at this level was there's a lot of Beverlys that have amazing potential, incredible value, and they just need a boost. They just need somebody to speak on their behalf and help them accelerate in a world that is still trying to pick and choose value based on titles, based on job descriptions, zip codes, age, gender, race, ethnicity. And so I stand here humbled today because I wanted to use my privilege or my tools to serve you, and I appreciate this opportunity. So here's what I want to tell you. For me, being in the chair 9 months, I've walked away with a couple things I think are critical that you and I should talk about today. But I'll be really honest with you, I do my best work one-on-one, and so I'm going to pretend that I'm having a conversation with each of you privately. But here's what I've discovered, and this is not a big secret, but I want you to understand that no matter how great our strategy, no matter how profound and competent our leadership, there are things that trip up the best associations, the best organizations, and they are really not centered around vision. Organizations don't fail for lack of vision. They don't fail for lack of strategic planning, but they do fail for underestimating the urgency, and the impact of change. They also fail for underestimating the importance of connection. And finally, and this may even be more important, that they fail to really understand the power of individual and collective capacity. Because in my opinion, leadership is not a right for some. It's a responsibility for all of us. So in light of these things, the impact of change, this thing called collective capacity, this idea about what do real connections look like, so what could we have if we get this right? Beyond the board level, beyond the regional level, what could this look like if we get it right? Here's my challenge to you this morning. There's a way that you're going to have to learn to use change to your advantage, because change is the only constant there is. Secondly, you're going to have to figure out how to connect, establish, and access vital connections that will strengthen and support you while you become a better version of yourself. And then finally, if we collectively begin to do this together, individually, you have to begin elevating your role and the significance and the value that is attached to that role. Now, imagine the possibility if everybody agrees to do this. If we all, in our individual spaces, agree that what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of the change rather than letting the change take advantage of me. And I'm going to access every vital support system I have to become a best version of myself to serve the people in my world. And I'm going to help elevate the significance and the value of the role I play exactly where I am. If we do that collectively, here's my thought. What a strategic plan cannot do, what a profound vision cannot do, what a competent and profound board cannot do, we need massive momentum. And momentum is built and not found. Now, I actually believe, when I look at this, I believe this is just about where we are. We're at this place where we're gaining momentum. And I don't know, but this is palpable to me. This is one of those things that when I'm passing people in the hallway and they're sharing their success stories and they're telling me their testimonials or they're passing me their business card that has CAP on it, there's a palpable energy. There's an explosiveness that's just beneath the surface, and I believe we're in the throes of a movement. I also believe that it is electric, and there's this energy that you can almost sense. And when you're close to people and you're talking, there's something almost magical about this moment, something almost serene. But here's what I'll tell you about a movement. A movement is characterized by three really critical things. One is we have to be on shared mission. We can't do this work without you. Secondly, we have to have a central core message that doesn't flip and switch and change depending on the weather or where we are. We have a central core message. And I think finally, it takes a massive amount of committed, energized, passionate individuals who feel the same way and are headed toward the same objective. And that's exactly where I believe we are, on shared mission with critical core message, and we're gaining momentum and mass as we go along. I told somebody, I've been here since Wednesday, and while I may be tired, I feel like I'm massing. And I said, the only way I can explain it is with every word I've heard, every story, every testimonial, every go get 'em girl, all of that, I feel larger today than I've ever felt. And that's not because I'm standing by myself. It's because you're standing with me. So I feel as though, that's right, we are on the verge of something incredible, and it's ours to own, but I feel like I want to name it for you, but here's what I want you to do. I'm going to need you to embrace it with me. I'm going to name it, but I'm going to need you to embrace it, and not just for here, because this is something I think we're going to have to own well beyond the summit. So when I thought about this, what is this thing I feel? And it started before Summit, but Summit has accentuated this feeling, this pulse, this rhythm. And here's the name I hear when I think of this. We lead up. We lead up. Now, let me tell you what that means, because to be a part of this movement, I want you to be really clear what the expectation is. Because notice the title of my slide, this entire deck was called Step Up. Man, do I know that place well. I've had to be the first in a lot of things. There's something that happens when you're first long enough, you get resilient. I told Peggy Vasquez, I said, the harder I'm hit, the more I want to play. I'm resilient. But this movement will be characterized by a couple of things. It means when I say step up, I'm talking about a group of people, a body of professionals that will step up in new levels of competence. Very critical to where we're going, that we're credible and competent in our sphere and our spaces. Secondly, stepping up in character. Now, I have a lot to say about character, but you don't have that long. But here's what I will say. I believe character is a competence. I believe you're incompetent without character. The third thing I think that will mark this movement, competence, character, confidence. Now, I happen to believe that confidence doesn't come because you know everything. I believe confidence comes because you believe you can learn anything. See, the thing about confidence begins in a little voice in your head that says you can. And I tell people all the time, you have to learn to silence the inner critic and become your raving fan in the stand for yourself. But the idea around this movement is critical for us because as a body of professionals, competence is going to be important. Character is going to be important. Confidence is going to be important. So how are we going to get there? So I'm going to give you some things I think are critical as we embark on this journey together. We're going to be talking about owning your moment in history. We're going to be talking about connecting to core because there's community, and then within every community, there's a core of people that just get you. They just get you. There's no judgment. And then we're going to talk finally about leading to value and what does that really mean. So let's start with own your moment. When I say this phrase to you, here's the thought in my heart for you. Is there is no insignificant moment. There is no moment to be seized than this one. The problem I have a lot of times is we're allowing other people to dictate our future, dictate what we can and should become. Nobody has a right to determine your future but you. HR can't determine what the role looks like, we do. Your boss can't determine what the role looks like, you do. And I can remember as a nurse when the image of nursing was changing. If you remember way back there, nursing was heroic. When you said you were a nurse, you almost floated because there was something angelic about it. And then if you watched in the news media and on television, you saw the identity of nursing change. And then we had nurses in the closet with doctors. And then we had, we had a completely different image of nursing. But we didn't drive that image change. And what I'm saying to you is we have an opportunity to drive this one. I don't want you to be a passive rider in your own profession. I want you to take the wheel. I want you to be willing to steer and guide and give valuable input. So when you're talking about owning a moment, there is no moment to be owned but now. And I'll tell you, when I think of this is the moment that from way back then, when I decided to walk with Beverly to one meeting, I could have never known the significance of that moment. There are no by chance meetings. There are no, just kind of thoughtless interactions. Everything becomes powerful. Everything becomes pregnant with purpose and potential. There are no absent moments. There are no moments you can afford to be just apathetic about them. So when you think about owning your moments in history, this is our time. I know people that keep deferring to the future because it feels safer. The way I find that people access the future is you have to create a vision to get there. So for some of you, that might be chief of staff. For some of you, that might be project manager. For some of you, that might be CEO. But you have to have a vision to access the future. So when I'm talking about owning history, there are things that are important for you and I to know because we don't exist in a vacuum. Your job is a part of an entire landscape of other people's jobs and professions. What we do is a part of business. It's a part of organizational management. And so we can't exist in a vacuum. But there's a lot of trends that are coming down the pike that are going to be important to you and I. So I want to talk just quickly about a few of them that I think have a direct bearing on what we do and where we are and who we are. And one of those is you're going to see, and you're already seeing, a shift away from degrees, from formal degrees, bachelor's, master's degrees. Now, this is because our workforce isn't broad enough, and they're finding that there are degrees attached to jobs that the degree isn't helpful for the job at all. So there's this move away from degrees, and there's this self-driving learning path that now businesses and organizations are saying there are new credentialing models. So all of a sudden, our certification looks incredibly attractive. Because right now, the world is saying, we don't have to have all these degrees, but we're going to be looking at new credentialing systems, new credentialing sources, and so certification and an accredited certification looks incredible right now. The second thing is the shelf life of skills is now 5 years, which means you and I run the risk of being outdated in half of a decade. Now, I have found a lot of people that have expired early. I mean, even the milk in your refrigerator has a best if used by date. So what I need you to do is stay committed to the journey of growth. Stay committed to the journey of development. Stay committed to the journey of optimization, because we're not there yet. If I asked you how much of you is optimized, I wonder what you'd say if I were sitting with you privately. Are you 60% optimized? Are you 70% optimized? Are you 80%? I believe the greatest need on the planet is self-actualization. It's the ability to be all of me for all of you. So that's going to be an important piece. Artificial intelligence. Technology itself is pushing us to new places. So now we have virtual assistants that aren't sitting within the scope of a business. They're sitting at home. Technology is making specialties. So now we have admins that specialize in technology, specialize in medicine, specialize in politics. How about legal? So all of a sudden, the landscape looks incredibly different, but technology is pushing us into global corners of the world where people on our team wake up 12 hours ahead of us. So you want to talk about cultural sensitivity, diversity, interpersonal communication, the power of being on team, collaboration. These will be monumental skill sets in the days to come, and there will be a premium on skill sets, and they will go to the highest player. So prepare yourself. The other thing I think is really important is the Me Too movement, and I never want to make light of this, but I have so much that I would say on this subject, but again, we don't have long. But I will tell you there's some things that are in place because of that you and I will now have to deal with, and one of those is a fear-based culture. Now, how many of you understand that when fear is in a place, people typically just get immobilized? Nobody says anything, everybody's just kind of moving on autopilot, and we're not having the conversations we need to have. But as an advocate for the profession, we have got to get in conversations about how to fight through all of the fear and have real conversations about how to optimize me as an admin, how to allow me to be a player on the field that is equal in business acumen and responsibility. That can't happen if we're stuck in these silos of fear and nobody's talking to anybody. I sat with part of our legal team maybe about 6 weeks ago, and I found out that there is a lot of new litigation around the term fraternal order. So now, because there's a lot of fear, it seemingly is almost permissive that it's not really safe for me to deal with you, so I'll go over here and just deal with these men, because it's a lot of work to figure out this thing over here. So this fraternal order has not only put the ceiling back on, but if we're not careful, it's going to bolton it down pretty tight, because now it's almost, there's an excuse to not play over here because that's a lot of work, and I'm not really sure if I get too close to you, I might offend you. I'm not sure where your space is and my space is. How do I invite you into my world and use you? I don't want to get involved in that. And for every person that came forward, can you imagine? There's probably another 10 that didn't. And so the issue we have got to deal with is far bigger than the roles we play and where we serve. There's a huge conversation underfoot, and I think the Me Too movement exposed the world's ask for us to redefine the role of women, the value of women, and the worth of women in the workplace. So we have really big things to tackle beyond some of the things I think that are a little easier. We have a lot of things we've got to get our arms around. So diversity, disparity, there's a number of things happening. And literally, again, you're going to find that these disparities are going to grow wider unless you work to close the performance gap. So we'll see generations and generations in the same workplace. And some will be staying longer, which means promotability may actually stagnate. So it's going to become a very competitive internal market, and you're going to have to be prepared for that. So when I looked at this data, none of this is new, but I'll tell you the things that this screams at me. If I look at these two data points to my right, the 30 and the 90%, the fact that people are still performing tasks way outside of the job description and they're working well beyond the balance of what is a normal workday, what that tells me is we must define the scope and the responsibilities associated with this role. Secondly, if we define the scope and the responsibilities, we've got to figure out what are the key competencies that are connected to the scope and the responsibility. And then once we determine what are the key competencies, we have to talk about what are the deliverables. What should the outcome be consistently at a level of quality? What must you be able to produce? And then the compensation will follow that bundle. But this tells me if we don't define it, somebody will. If we don't figure out what is the scope and the role of the administrative professional, what are the competencies absolutely required depending on where you are in the career progression, and then what do you have to deliver to be at the top of your game, and then pay me accordingly, somebody else will define that for us. So I need you to be thinking about that. So when I'm talking about a movement, I'm saying to you this is an impossible thing to do as a party of one or a party of seven. So the thing that I find that makes leadership uncomfortable for most people is we don't like responsibility. And it's not until I tell you you're responsible that you get uncomfortable. But we've always been responsible. And so I want us to really begin to understand responsibility mandates I act differently. It makes me have to do and say things radically different. I told somebody, because I'm on this journey with you and I'm positioned in this space, there are things in my future I can never do or say because I am uniquely, consistently connected to you for the duration, which means I can't change teams because the balance of my influence is too powerful. No matter where I sit and who I'm playing with, I have to remember team. See, for me, that's character. Because I believe great leaders stabilize the confidence of people, not destabilize the confidence of people. So how do you own your moment? Because that's what I'm asking you to do, to take the moment right now that you have and determine exactly what you're going to do, exactly where you're going from here, and how do you do that? First of all, we have to stop waiting for permission. You don't need permission to be great. You don't need permission to save money. You don't need permission to save your boss time. You don't need permission to solve a problem. You don't need permission to do great customer service. You don't need permission. This statement is shrouded in fear and insecurity because we want somebody to tell us exactly how to do it. Confirm I'm on the right path. Fear of making a mistake. They won't fault you for saving money or improving the bottom line. Be willing to abandon the familiar. This is a hard one because most of us are programmed for stranger danger. Remember that as a kid? Stranger danger, right? But as an adult, we've held on to the concept that everything that is strange to us must be avoided. You cannot become your best self living in the land of comfort and familiar. It's an impossibility. Here's my analogy for you. If I drive home the same way, anybody do that besides me? Take the exact same path home? So you can get there without thinking, can't you? There's been times I've driven myself an entire 40 minutes. I have no idea how many stop signs, how many little old ladies. I have no idea how many red lights, green lights. I never saw it because I could make the trip mindlessly, which means I would miss a lot of opportunity. Familiar is like kryptonite to your Superman. And finally, you got to do what needs to be done. If I had $1 for every time somebody said, that's not my job, that's not in my job description. Let me tell you what a great executive wants. They want you to think, to do what needs to be done, to run the risk of compiling autonomy, critical thinking, and business acumen and come up with something amazing. They want you to do what needs to be done. I believe that separates a mediocre performer from a high performer. So connect to the core. Here's what I'll tell you. In all of this complexity and all this technology, you got 15,000 Facebook friends. And we're dying for connection. The data says it's 34 emails to make one interaction. Somehow the world is convincing us we're more connected than we've ever been, but I don't feel that. I actually think if we're not careful, there's a dehumanization that's creeping around, and maybe we're becoming the robots. Because it's easier to send an email, a text message, than have to call you or look you in your face and talk directly to you. I actually think people are craving human connection. I actually think I would put it on my resume if I were you, that I have the ability to connect with people in an amazingly engaging way and cause them to be bigger, better, faster, stronger from being in my presence. Somewhere that's going to be a really, really critical piece of data. Because technology has us convinced that we can be very superficial and very shallow with people, and so there's very little investment in human potential. There's very little of this thing we call human kindness. So for me, this is critical. I'm a bit of a social butterfly. My mom would say things to me like, why in the world in the morning, as soon as you get up, you put your feet on the floor and your mouth flies open? Because I wanted everybody talking and talking and talking and getting along. And believe it or not, kindergarten, first day of school, I walked kids home and was lost. I didn't even know how to get home myself, but I've always been this way about people and connection, which is why I really wanted to be a nurse, because I wanted to do something that would connect me with compassion and people. I will tell you, there is no richer currency on the planet than relational currency. It is spendable. Have you ever used somebody's name to get a job? Have you ever said, I'm with so-and-so and got in the door? Relational currency spends. I'm going to tell you how much it spent for me. As a young kid born to a single mom, I lived a stone's throw away from a hospital and a church. And I played in both lanes. And I remember as a kid riding my bike in that parking lot in Citizens General Hospital, and I played over there because there was not a whole lot to do. Mom was at work, 2 to 3 jobs. And I was bored easily. I don't know that you could imagine that. But I rode my bike over there till I met all the ER nurses. And I was amazed at them. And I would wave, and I would know all of them by name. And they would start calling me Veronica. And then they started bringing me lunch. So now I was hooked. I was over in the emergency department every day eating lunch with the nurses. And this was before HIPAA. So nobody cared. Nobody cared that I was there eating lunch with the nurses and watching the TV that hung in the waiting room, if you can remember those, right? But here's what happened. And I had so much relational currency in those few nurses that my mom was rushed to what was now my hospital. And she was hemorrhaging to death. And they brought my mom through my ED. And I remember looking at my mom go by, and I could not even recognize her. And there were towels of blood all around her. And I remember a nurse grabbing me, and another nurse said, "That's Veronica's mom." And they whisked her away like she was the VIP. And when they brought her back to me, she was the way I remembered. And all I knew was whatever they were, I needed to become it. Relational currency. My relationship with a few nurses got my mom the red carpet treatment. They didn't sign a bunch of papers. They didn't ask her about insurance. They whisked her away and brought her back the way I remember. See, the one thing I have down, I understand the value of people. And I don't mind walking and talking all day and meeting people face to face because people need to connect to real people. So here's the thing community is supposed to do for you, which is why you need it. And I'm going to be really honest and go out on a limb here and tell you independence is not a strength. Independence is not a strength. It'll kill you. It'll kill you early. But your community has a role for you. One is it's supposed to help you figure out who you are. Your community is part of you identifying who you are. They're the people that tell you about you. They inform you about you. Without a great core, you can't even know you. Secondly, they're your developmental learning lab. They're the people who you get to grow with. They're the people that tell you things you could do bigger, better, faster, stronger. They tell you where your gifts are. They tell you where your strengths are. They tell you where you should be headed, the things that maybe you could possibly be doing. They're part of your developmental lab. And probably most importantly, your core is part of your socialization so that you have some social intelligence to play well with other people. You want to talk about core being important? The reason the board undertook this entire decision to really take a look at the archetype, who do we say we are as IAAP? What is the experience every member and non-member should be having when they encounter us? And that connection was at the core of that decision. We wanted people to feel a sense of belonging. So our archetype was that of a peer mentor. Somebody that would accompany you through the journey of your professional career. Be that just-in-time voice of counsel, social intelligence, the one to tell you where your strengths are, maybe what you should be doing next. That is critical. Even the naming, the changing of the name, moving away from land to something that would feel much more palpable because we understood the value of the connection. You ever felt like this? Shared experience is not only powerful, it is empowering. And there's something incredible that happens when we put all of our guard down and get incredibly transparent with people, and we allow them to see us for who we really are. See, my hope for you is that not just the education the conference provides, because I think we have amazing education, but there's something that happens when people connect that is more powerful than even the education. There's something that we witness that's amazing when we connect with human potential. You know, I actually think the admin profession has kind of a compounded, maybe, problem in this arena simply because most of us don't have departments. I mean, it's a bit of a different role, position. It's unique. There's typically, traditionally, hadn't been a department of admins, unless it was a secretary pool. And so we're always struggling with this thing about where do I belong? How do I fit? And I know a lot of people who have said to me, I don't know where I fit. And so we have been begging for inclusion. But what if I told you this? And this is another one of my ahas. Inclusion is not enough. Inclusion is not enough. It's not enough to be at the table. We've got to be a part of the collective authority at the table. And that's a very different equation. If you've ever been in the room and not asked of anything by being in the room, you know exactly what I mean. Inclusion is just our presence. But what I'm after is how do we become included in the one mind of business, in the responsibilities for governing and running business and improving the deliverables and the outcomes? How do we become part of the collective authority that makes those decisions? Well, that's a bigger ask than just put me in the room. So when you talk about connect to core, this is a critical piece for us. How do we do that? Those of us that are a little less comfortable with getting close to people. Because I know there's a lot of people that just, it's not my thing. I'm not too sure about that one. You need a community of people to stabilize and secure you while you become a better version of yourself. So how does that happen? First of all, you have to identify the payoff. There's a payoff to everything. What happens is we kind of unconsciously move away from pain and unconsciously move toward things that make us happy. But you have to begin to identify what is the thing that your core gives you that you don't get anywhere else. And you may have more than one core. And there might be a group that gives you wonderful professional resource and advice. There might be a whole other core that gives you the ability to be socially silly and fun. But you have to identify what's in it for you. Because there's always a payoff, because people don't do anything that doesn't have a return on investment. We're just wired that way. What's in it for me? So you have to think about that. Now, for some of you, being a part of IAAP, the payoff might be that you get career promotion, maybe promotability. Maybe you come and you get a certification and all of a sudden there's a new path for you that opens, a new job that opens, a new pay scale that opens. But whatever the case, you got to begin to identify what is the payoff? What are you after? The second thing is I double dog dare you to acknowledge that you need a community, that you need people, that you need a core, that you need people that will have your back, have your best interests. And what I think is far more important, you need people that will challenge you. See, I don't need a yes corner, but I need a group of individuals that don't mind telling me, here's how we should be thinking. Here's what we should be doing. Have you considered that? I don't know if that's the best way to tackle that. See, for me, we've come to the conclusion as a body of people that for me to challenge you is somehow to do you a disservice. I'm part of your growth step. So it's not a disservice when I get to tell you legitimately, honestly, authentically, lovingly that I think you could do better. See, what's not fair is when everybody else knows that you're not a good team player except you. Right? And they orient people to people who are not team players. Don't get close to Martha. If she doesn't have her coffee by 10 o'clock, she is no fun. So we orient all the new people to dysfunctional behavior instead of somebody saying to Martha, look, I'm going to need you to get your coffee a little earlier so you can come and play. I'm sure every time you see me, you see Alex, and he is an incredible friend for me, confidant, husband of 30 years. We got married at 10. But that man challenges me to grow every step of the way. And on the days when I think I can't and my wings just don't want to come up, he manages to give me just enough wind to take flight. You need people. Oh, yeah. Lucy, you understand that, I know, right? That there's something that happens. Nobody is heroic alone. Man, do I want you to hear me. You know, I didn't get in this chair because I had something to prove. I was doing pretty well. Running my own shop, had my own company, 8 years old, making my own money, doing my own thing. I got a bunch of plaques on the wall. I got degrees. I got this incredible husband. I got a great family. My son's in Hamilton. My daughter works for me. And now I got a grandbaby. I wanted to be here. I want to make a difference. People say to me, well, how long? How long are you going to be here? You know, I heard you maybe not going to be around long. Here's the promise I make you. I was in the organization before I got in the chair. And I will assure you that I'll still be playing when I'm not in the chair. Because it's my team. It's my team. I will always play. I'll always use my privilege to serve you. That's without question. So connecting to core, we have to challenge each other to grow. So lead to value. Now, I could say a lot about this. For those of you that know, I love the topic of leadership. But here's what I'll tell you. The world has done you a disservice because they made you believe that leadership is dependent on degrees, direct authority, and direct reports. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Leadership is about people who want to make a difference. And I'm going to define leadership for you the way I define it for me, because it doesn't have anything to do with a list of incredible competencies. The way I define the word leader is simply this: a leader distills and dispenses hope and is willing to offer themselves for its reality. Now I want you to think about what I said, because I think leaders, and all historical leaders that have come and gone, have done something magical with being able to dispense hope and get people to see the possibilities of the future, what we could do, what we could be if we only work together. Leaders are powerful at instilling hope, and they're willing to die for their cause even if they don't complete it. See, that's what I think leaders do. I think leaders are people that people gravitate to because there's something about them that's optimistic about the future, not pessimistic about the future. See, the thing that bothers me sometimes about Facebook and social media stuff is you have no context. And so without the context, you have like half a story. You have like a line of the story. You may not even have the truth of the story. And here's how I feel about things like that, since I'm out here and I got the mic. That's easy to do, but it's cowardice. I think I said at town hall, I've been in this chair 9 months, and I've got one call saying, hey, can I have a talk with you? Here's what I'll say. When you can use your influence to destabilize the confidence of a people in their membership or in their leadership, that is not leaderly. That's anything but leaderly. Leaders instill confidence. Leaders promote hope. Leaders propagate change. Now, I don't run from a dogfight, so I'm up for it. But here's what I'll tell you. I've been, I've got a little street credit. So somebody said, well, I think somebody said you're a bit of a pit bull. So here's what I'll say to that. If I am, and I might be, you're all right if I'm the pit bull on your yard. If you jump the fence, you got problems. So we're talking about leading to value. I talk to 1 million people that tell me, Veronica, I don't feel like I'm used properly as an admin. I don't feel valued in the role. I feel like they don't see me. They don't really get me. See, when I say to people, that's your job, not their job. Their job is not to figure you out. Your job is to reveal yourself. I gave the analogy of this way. If I had an incredible Picasso painting and I put the painting in the basement and I said to you, come to my house, and I gave you a tour of all of my home, and I took you in the basement, and then I brought you back upstairs through the kitchen, sat you down, and I said to you, did you see my Picasso? Or you would probably say, where? Because it wasn't positioned in the right light. Your job is to position yourself in the right light, to showcase your talent, your strength, your expertise. And nobody has to ask you for that. You showcase that. So when I think about leadership and I think about where we have to go, this thing about leadership is really connected to this thing about value. And leaders provide value. One of the greatest quotes I heard come out of the Me Too movement was simply this, that I use my privilege to serve others. What a novel idea. When you think about value, perceived value, it has bearing on everything. How you perceive whether you're valued little or much has to do with how you perform. It will affect future possibilities. It will affect the way people pay you. It will affect your promotability. But here's the thing I need you to understand. All value is not the same. There is the value of the role. What we're trying to do is help them understand the value of the role. A lot of work to do in this bucket. But nobody can argue that it is incredibly valuable, but we have to begin to showcase just how valuable it is. But then there's the value of your work, which has nothing to do with the value of the role, because you could work way outside of the parameters of the role. You could do anything in that role to bring all of your gifts, all of your talent and strength to bear. So there's the value of the role, there's the value of your work, separate from the role, and finally, there's the value of your being apart from your doing. Now, let me say what I'm talking about. This is the one that's kind of tricky. The value of your being that has nothing to do with what you will ever do. You simply have value for being. Now, if I begin to move your value for the role and I play with the value of your work, that typically throws people off because there's not enough value in the third container to support it. Which means I don't have enough self-value for me to be okay with the role changing or the work changing. That third bucket is more important than the other two combined. Is the value that you hold for you apart from the work you do, apart from where you do it, apart from the job description and the compensation. Because newsflash, they can't pay you what you're worth. They can't pay you what you're worth, but we can make them try. So when you think about these things, somebody said to me, so how do I raise the value, my self-value? Like how do I do that? How do I get more value in this third bucket? I said, that's simple. The first thing you have to remember is you were educated to not just what you could be, you were educated to what you could not be. Somewhere in the psyche of them comparing you to your sister who is really athletic and you not so, just in the comparison was a limitation. That your brother was really smart and he brought home all the A's and you... See, somewhere in our education, we were educated to all of our limitations as well as all the things we thought we could be. So you need more education about who you really are because you were educated at the point of limitation. So the way you change the internal value is, first of all, you have to have new experiences so that you can begin to see yourself differently. That's why I believe leadership is learned, because you can learn to lead, and the more you do it, the more you experience it, the more your identity turns, and you begin saying, yeah, I'm pretty good at that. I'm actually okay at leading. You know what? This is pretty easy for me. But if you don't have new experience, you can't begin to reshape the identity of how you see yourself, and there's nothing more important than that. So you need new experiences, which is why you have to be willing to abandon the familiar, because you need a new experience so that you can learn you afresh. Secondly, education is critical. You have to keep learning. You have to keep learning, because the more you learn, the more your identity and how you see yourself and what you see you becoming and what you think is your future will all change the more educated you become. And all education is not academic nor scholastic. There's different levels of education. I'm a consummate learner. I don't really like not to know. Anybody else got that problem? But I like to keep learning. And so you have to understand you need experience, you need education, and finally you need a life support system. You need an environment of people that will let you grow and figure it out, and they will support you, and they will challenge you. Just like Nora said, if you fail the test, they'll say, hey, go ahead and schedule it again. See, the only way you're going to get that third bucket full is you need new experience, new education, and you need a new environment. And sometimes you're traveling with people who don't want to challenge you, and you need to get in a circle of people who will. You need people that will challenge you to be bigger, better, faster, stronger. So there's a poem I really like, and if you've never heard the poem, I wish I could tell you the name of it, but I really don't know because I always quote the two parts I do know. And maybe it's called Our Deepest Fear, but I don't think so. But if you've ever heard it, there are two parts in this poem that give me chills. And one is, our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Not that we're weak and infirmed and impotent and incapable and not enough, but our deepest fear is that we're really powerful. Our deepest fear is that my power is going to show up somebody else's. And so we come away from the light rather than to the light. But here's the other part of the poem, which I love, and it says, and as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. So there's something contagious that happens when I allow myself to stand in the full suit of myself and let you see me as I am. And that contagiousness actually propels you to be even better. I try to stay in the company of people that are far better than me, that do greater work than me, that are far more competent than me, that have more integrity than me, because I don't want to be a big fish in a little pond. I want to grow. I want to change. You know, and after having my granddaughter, I have to be really honest with you, I feel a crazy sense of duty. Kind of like when I'm talking with each of you, I feel this incredible excitement, and then I feel this burden of responsibility to get this right. So I don't leave those conversations, just having drunk the Kool-Aid. I leave the conversation sober, thinking about what do I really need to do. So I'm talking to men about what they need from the association. That's very different from the need of a woman. Talking about international membership. How do we get our arms around that? Where we have an international title, we need a larger international footprint. So there's a lot that has to be done. So how do you lead to value? The first thing is, man, do we have to begin to treat this as a profession? Yeah, you should be raising up the roof on that one. And part of this is, and this is what makes the work I have to do somewhat challenging, because we have to reteach them how to see us. That's all of our work. So it's hard for me to go to an exec and say, hey, I want to invite you to a roundtable. We're interested in how to meet your needs, creating an employee portal so that you can have some just-in-time support for how to hire the best admin, how to optimize his or her talent and ability, how to pay her accordingly. It's hard to have those conversations when you're sleeping with the enemy. Because how are we going to ask them to respect us? And we're divisive in our nature. It's hard to do. See, every interaction matters. Every relationship counts. There are no inconsequential moments. There are no interactions that don't matter. There's no such thing. I went all the way downtown to meet Beverly, to go all the way to one chapter meeting, to be a part of building your leadership academy, part of building your master class, part of building your EA symposium so that I could one day be your CEO. There are no accidental moments. So to treat it as a profession, well, you know what that means? That means that there's a core body of knowledge. That means there are demonstrable competencies that are assigned to the profession that have deliverable, deliberate outcomes. And then there's a fair wage that's attached to that work. It's treated as a profession, which means some of us should be considering certification. Somebody said, well, Veronica, why would I get certified? I already have a degree. Because my degree in nursing is a stationary body of knowledge that hasn't changed since, long time. But when I keep my nursing license up, that proves to everybody that I'm still current and relevant in my scope of profession. So you do need both. You have to develop confidence in your impact. And before you can have confidence in your impact, you have to know where you have impact. Some of you have to sit down and figure out, how do you support the value streams of your business? How do you support the bottom line? How do you help them make money? How do you offer brand alignment? How do you clear customer complaints? How do you help them gain new customers? How do you help them solve problems? You have to figure out how you support those value streams. And that's quantifiable, so much so that when you figure out where you add value, you can assign a dollar amount to that because time equals money. And then you can take that into your next performance review and say, look how much money I saved you. Give it to me. So developing confidence in your impact is critical. And then finally, I believe everybody on the planet should have a growth track. I believe everybody should have a sense of here's where I am, but that's where I'm headed, and here's the steps I'm going to use to get there. Now, I believe part of everybody's leadership track, if you're not certified, golly gee, should you be? I didn't mean to make that rhyme. But I do believe you should be. The Leadership Academy is coming back bigger, stronger than ever, and my counterpart, Francisco, are you in here? There he is, partner in crime. Let me tell you, I can't get really far away from the Leadership Academy, but I will tell you the stories, the testimonials, the growth. Deidre is now on the board. There's so many powerful things that happen when we create a leadership pipeline and develop specifically for not generic leadership, because there's a different leader that Apple looks for as opposed to Mercedes-Benz. So part of our work is to figure out what is our unique leader profile, what are the competencies that have to be assigned to it, what are the deliverables, and then we have to develop where we find a gap. So if you don't have a professional growth track, you need one. Leadership Academy should be on there. Certification should be on there. I would tell anybody, because we're going so far in the technology space, social skills are going to make a comeback. The ability to be socially intelligent, understand diversity and culture is going to hit the top of the list because you're going to have global teams that you're meeting with that don't even speak the language you speak. And the difference in looking them in the eye that you think is respectful, they think is a challenge. Somebody will pay you for that. So implementing a growth track is really important. So here's where I am. That's on purpose. So here's what I believe happened to me when I went with Beverly. I believe I had a moment in that initial meeting with Beverly that I needed to take advantage of history. At one moment where they said, will you speak at this lunch and learn? Maybe 12 people. But I owned the moment. And gosh, did I find that I was connected to a people who needed what I had, and man, I wanted to give them what I had. And I never stopped going. And then I began to lead up. I began to use my skills, my philosophy of leadership, my thoughts around how it could be bigger, better, faster, stronger. And I began to go with my tools and use my privileges to serve them. You have to find the same moments where you're going to own the moment, you're going to connect, and you're going to lead up. Because it will happen to you every nanosecond if you know what you're looking for. If I told you I was going to be at your house and I'm going to come in a yellow cab, you would be looking for me in a yellow cab. If I didn't come in a yellow cab, you would miss me. So what I'm doing is giving you the yellow cab. I need you to be looking for ways to lead up. So here's where we've been. The impact of change is here. The urgency of change is here. The importance of connections can never be overstated. We need each other in ways that only history will bear out. There's an imperative in you coming to your full capacity and me coming to mine, and us collectively having capacity as a body of professionals. If we're ever going to move the dial of the profession, it will not be by way of a small silo. So my challenge to you was, you've got to begin to use change to your advantage. You have to access the vital support systems that get you what you need while you grow and change and develop and become the better, best version of yourself possible. And finally, if we each work to elevate the role, its value, and its significance, if we do it as a party of one, we will hit that massive place of momentum. And the world won't know what hit it. Because we'll be like the mafia. And we will bring an entirely new level of change. So you've got to own your moment in history. Not tomorrow, right now. You've got to connect to the core. Figure out where is your community? Where's the people that do it for you? Connect to IAAP. Some of you, that means membership. That means connecting to a core that will help get you educated, help accelerate your career track. And then you have to lead to value, not position, because everybody wants a title. But if we get this right, you can no more contain leadership to a position than we could air to this room. It's impossible. So I'm going to leave you with these words, and I want you to feel them in the spirit that I mean them. You are not alone. I stepped here to tell you, you are not alone. I came to the chair and decided to play because I want you to know you are not alone. There is a voice with you and for you, speaking on your behalf, advocating to executives, HR, secondary education, about the value of our role, the significance that we play. You are not alone. You belong, and that's important for you to know. You belong right here. And I actually believe that you belong there at that table with that boss as a partner. But I said all that to say, we lead up. Let's do the thing.